In the Descendants films, there is still a lot of information we simply do not know. One of those things is we know nothing about any of the villain kids' past before they came onto Auradon. We don't even know if the kids were born on the Isle or if they were originally born in Auradon. Perhaps one of the VK's history may be a bit darker than we think. In particular, Uma may be the one to look out for. Without further ado, let's dive right in to find out why Uma may have a darker past than you think. Before we hop into the video, remember to subscribe and turn notifications on. Also, don't forget to leave a like and comment down below saying you did so, and we will try to respond to as many of you as we can. Uma's father. One of the most intriguing and puzzling pieces of backstory we do not know is who is Uma's father. Not only do we not know who Uma's father is, we don't know who the fathers are of Carlos or Evie. We only know that Jay's father is Jafar and Mal's father is Hades. However, on the flip side, we only know that Evie's mother is the evil queen, Carlos's mother is Cruella de Vil, Mal's mother is Maleficent, and Uma's mother is Ursula. So then, who could potentially be Uma's father? If we could guess, Poseidon, the brother of King Triton, could be a good candidate for Uma's father. Whether or not that is true, we may never know. However, if he really is Uma's father, Uma may have had a very rough childhood. Think about it, if Ursula has fought to rule Atlantis along with most likely his brother, that would make for some pretty interesting family get-togethers. As Ursula has learned that to get anything you want, sometimes you have to play dirty tricks, perhaps Uma has learned herself that to do the things you want to do, sometimes you simply need to have some tricks up her sleeve. In Descendants 3, I think we will see more Uma and possibly even some of the consequences of her childhood. Whether or not Poseidon is her father, she at the very least grew up with Ursula, which most likely made Uma one tough cookie, or should we say octopus. Would Uma be willing to do whatever it takes? Going back to the topic of Uma possibly having a rough childhood, you would have to think Uma may have been quite mischievous. If your mother knew how to use magic spells and potions, wouldn't you think Uma may have learned a thing or two? Growing up, Uma most likely felt like an outcast and felt jealous of the other VKs. In particular, she was jealous of Mal. Perhaps there was a time when Uma looked up to Mal, but eventually filled with jealousy and hatred. I mean, yes, Uma is not necessarily rotten to the core, but would she be willing to do what it takes to get revenge on Mal? It's not that she wants to be evil, it's just that she wants to be accepted. With enough anger, almost anyone, regardless of how their moral is, can become quite evil. Take Maleficent, for example. Maleficent felt neglected and jealous, so with the hatred, anger, and jealousy erupting inside of her, it fueled her, turning her evil. Deep down, Uma really wants to be a normal teen on Auradon, but there is this part of her that realizes that day may never come. Now that Uma made it over to Auradon illegally, she now has powers to wreak havoc. She may have been considered not being bad, but if it comes down to getting revenge on Mal, no matter what, she may not hesitate. Uma and Mal may have had a long past, so now what is stopping her from doing what she wants? Family feud. As we all know, Uma has a big hatred for Mal. Somehow, some time ago, the hatred for Mal began. Perhaps the hatred did not start with Uma, but instead it started with Maleficent and Ursula long ago. For all we know, Ursula and Maleficent could have ended up in a huge argument, ultimately becoming enemies. There may have even been a time when these two were best friends. Now they want nothing to do with each other and make their children hate each other as well. If they even associate with each other, well, let's just say blood may be spilled. That is, if Ursula and Maleficent actually had their powers. The most they could do is hurt each other, but even that is low for them. Now, how does this play into Uma? Well, perhaps Uma once looked up to Mal as a role model, but then may have been jealous when she realized that Mal was the designated leader of the VKs by birth. Mal is the special one. She gets all the things she wants, she is in charge, the leader, and the one to be feared. What does Uma have? If you look at what she's got, she doesn't have much. Jealousy can do bad things to people, and who knows if their parents have anything to do with it. We cannot even imagine what Uma was going through, as it is one one thing to be neglected and another to simply not feel like you exist. Uma is hurt, and because of her hurt, she may have had a troubled past with Mal. What if Uma is actually Mal's sister? This is a far-fetched theory, but what if Uma was the sister to Mal? Ursula is still her mother, but what if her father was Hades? This theory could actually explain why Hades did not live with Mal and Maleficent. Perhaps long before Hades met Maleficent, Hades fell in love with Ursula and bore her a child. When Hades found out that a child was born, he left Ursula to go find some other woman. Later on, he found Maleficent, who he seemed to like all the more. He again bore a child for Maleficent, but this time he stayed. It wasn't until Maleficent later found out that Hades had actually bore a child to Ursula and just left her to care for the child. Because Maleficent didn't want to make any matters worse, Maleficent left Hades and took her daughter with her. Maleficent became furious that Ursula's daughter was now her daughter's half-sister. She hated the idea because she hated Ursula. However, to protect Mal and Uma from ever finding out the truth, Maleficent cast a spell that erased all memories from all of them being siblings and all memories of them sharing the same father. As they grew up as enemies, not siblings. Another aspect that could confirm this theory is Uma was born with blue hair. Who else has blue hair? Hades does. If this is indeed true, this would also explain why Maleficent and Ursula don't have a husband in the Descendants films. If Uma and Mal were sisters, it could theoretically change everything they know and would give Uma and Mal that much more to hate each other. But I mean, who wouldn't want to see Uma and Mal team up to get revenge on Hades? We most certainly would. What if Uma doesn't actually exist? One of the theories about Uma's past is that she doesn't actually exist at all. In fact, all of the VKs don't actually exist. All of the VKs are clones, or simply put, versions of the adult villains: Maleficent, Evil Queen, Cruella de Vil, Jafar, and Ursula. What is something Ursula is known for? Well, she is good with magic, that she can turn herself into a different person entirely. Perhaps these main villains knew that one day they would be exiled to the Isle of the Lost, so they put a plan into place to make sure they can still enact their evil desires. With Ursula's magic, Maleficent, Cruella de Vil, the Evil Queen, and Jafar all created alternate egos of themselves in the form of their children. Maleficent created Mal, Jafar created Jay, Cruella created Carlos, the Evil Queen created Evie, and Ursula created Uma. Once they were created, the villains then gave them all new personalities so they wouldn't know they were clones of them. The clones' responsibilities were to then make it onto Auradon and fulfill the evil plan to bring back the villains once and for all. Once the mission was complete, the VKs, Evie, Carlos, Mal, and Jay, would disappear and never be seen again. Now, this theory most likely is not true at all, but if it is, this would be a very wicked plan. Then again, you are talking about villains. Villains always have some sort of plan and are steps ahead. Just as Uma said, you didn't think this was the end, did you? If you thought this was the end of the adult villains, you may be completely wrong. Either way, we will have to see what happens in Descendants 3. Just how powerful is Uma? In Descendants 2, we learn that Uma has powers just like her mom. Granted, we only saw a small glimpse of what she can do. What if Uma does not gain her true powers until later on in life? We know that she inherited powers from her mom, and now what about her dad? Depending on who her dad really is, she could be more powerful than we think. That being said, as Uma grew up, she wouldn't have any powers. However, once she snuck onto Auradon, she received her powers as magic exists on Auradon. It would be pretty cool to see Uma use those powers, and who knows, maybe she'll try to use them in the fight against Hades. Perhaps Uma has a secret power we simply do not know about. She could have very well learned plenty of things from her mother, including the art of manipulation and body language. Those are two very very important traits Ursula has. After all, she is Ursula's daughter and, like daughter, like mother, right? Maybe because of her family feud, Ursula taught those things to her daughter to help her get back at Mal. Either way, it would be a nice treat to see what Uma really has up her sleeve in D3. Is Uma really rotten to the core? As it stands right now, Uma is evil, or so it seems. What if, by chance, Uma is simply putting on a show on the outside just so she can get revenge on Mal, but deep down, she's good? If she were born evil, evil is in her DNA, so being evil is just naturally who she is. Think of it this way: an apple is red. You can paint the apple to look like an orange all you want, but underneath the surface, it is still an apple. For Uma, the question is, how long can she really keep up with the act of fighting Mal? Eventually, there will come a time when she cannot fight anymore and she simply gives up. All she really wants is to be loved. For all we know, she also just wants a friend. Perhaps she may even help Mal in Descendants 3, helping her to get rid of Hades. What we will have to find out is if Uma can truly become good. Hopefully, she does not embrace the evil, but instead tries to be good. In the end, we will not know the outcome of her fate for good until we see Descendants 3. Conclusion: we have explored the many theories of why Uma could possibly have a darker past than we may think. Who knows, maybe some of these could actually be true. Perhaps the books may shed some light onto Uma's clouded past. While we only touched on some things, these are just the surface of what could appear in the film itself. Will we see Uma become fully evil? Or will we see her finally become a hero? This tale, as old as time, will be told in a dime when we find out in Descendants 3 later this summer.